Now we have the basic structure, the basic shape and building blocks of our application. Let's fill them out. Let's start at the beginning where this is super easy. We're just going to put our standard print statements. There you go. Nothing new there. Now the next thing we're going to do is get the birthday from the user. And what we need to return from this method is an actual date time, not just some text or something like that. But we'll start by receiving text. We'll ask the user a question, we'll get some text, and then we'll turn that into a date. And there's actually a bunch of ways to do that. We'll do the most straightforward way for now. So we're going to ask the user when were they born, and then we're going to use our input to get the year, the month, and the day. So we'll say year like this, and we'll give it a little. Now the next thing I want to do is kind of the same thing, but for the month, and I could copy and paste this, I could retype it, or in PyCharm I hit Command D, and it'll just duplicate whatever you have selected. That's super handy. So then I'll say month. I'll change this to be appropriate here. I'll say month and mm. And same thing for the day. So I called this year, month, and day, and it turns out we're not quite done with this section, but let's just see what goes wrong, and then we'll come back and fix it. So the next thing I need to do is work with dates, and dates are contained in a module called datetime, and we actually, like before with our random, we have to import datetime. So we can come over and say import datetime, and then we can come down here, and now we can work with it. We'll say, let's call this birthday. And we're going to come here and we'll say datetime. This is the module we've imported. Now the next thing is, it's just a little confusing when you first see it. There's datetime dot datetime. Okay, so what's going on here? This is the module that we imported. And within there, there's several things that represent dates and times. There's datetime, which represents a day on the calendar and a specific time on that day. There's date, which is just the day on the calendar without the time component. There's time, which is just the time part. And there's time delta, which is the difference between two date times. So maybe it's a little unfortunate, maybe not, but we say datetime.datetime, and this is a class, so we can allocate a new instance of it. So we have the year, the month, the day, the hour, minute, second. We can omit everything but the year if we'd like. So we're going to put in year, month, day. And the last thing to do is we need to get our birthday that we're creating here, and we need to return this out of this function. We need to give it back so that we can capture it in this variable down here, pass it along, and that's super straightforward. We just say return birthday, and that's going to return it from the function. You can see the little warning about it not returning a value down here is gone. So everything looks good. It's not good, but it looks good. There's actually two things that are not going to work great. Let me just do a quick reformat so we only see errors, not just PEP 8 warnings. So when I try to run this, it's going to be underwhelming. Notice there's no run configuration. So I'll go over here and I'll say right click and then run. Now, when it runs, you probably thought that it was going to ask us questions like, hey, what year, what month were you born, and so on. But remember, I told you there's no convention around executing like a main method or anything like that. And this is just for me to organize my thoughts, right? To sort of group this into smaller building blocks. One way we can trigger this to work is we can just call the main method at the end of the script. It's not technically the best way of doing it, but let's just do this for now, and then we'll come back and we'll improve upon it. So now if I run it, you can see it says, tell us when you were born, and let's say 1974, and it asks for the month. Okay, April, and the day was, let's say, 1st. If I hit enter, you can tell it's obviously not happy. Why is it not happy? Well, it's a type error, and it says an integer is required, but we got a string. Where's that? So it turns out that these have to be numbers, and they're not numbers. They're things that have come back from input, which are always strings. So we need to convert them, right? So that's the one thing that was missing here. And we can do this in several steps, or we can just sort of combine it like this. Say int. Recall that we convert from a string to an integer by just passing the string to the initializer of the int class. All right, so now these should be integers, but if you put in something that's not an integer, it's going to crash. In a real app, we should check for this. When we get to the error handling section of the course, we'll talk a lot about this. Right now, let's assume that they're giving us valid numbers. So now if we run it, we should get it to work much better. Now it's still not going to work. And in the end, I think it may crash. It might make it to the end. Let's see. Yeah. So we made it farther. Just down here, we haven't quite finished this. So we made it down this far. Let me turn on line numbers really quick for you. So I come over here and search in the settings. Under general here, you can see I can just turn on show line numbers. All right, so now I can tell you when we make it down to line 31, everything is working fine. And these other parts, not so much yet. So let's just comment those out really quick. And I like to just maybe do a print statement as I go along, just to kind of see as it builds up, right? If it's a simple app, what we're getting. So let's go over here and just put in some numbers, and you can see we've actually generated a datetime object and we've returned it here, and it's okay. So it looks like this step is totally working.